Hey there, everyone. How are we doing today? My name is James Spencer, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS, and welcome once more to Howdy Partner. Well, what is Howdy Partner? Howdy Partner is our weekly Twitch show we do at AWS, part of the partner network, where we bring on our partners to talk about their solutions, talk about the business impact they make, show us some of the stuff they've done. Please feel free to ask your questions, leave your comments. We'll try and get to them as much as possible today. Today, I am joined by a co-host, my friend Peter.
Hey, James.
Peter,
Hey, everyone.
how are you
How are you?
doing?
Good. Yourself?
Good, good.
Thanks for having me. So,
Nice.
I'm Peter. I'm also a partner solution architect here at AWS with the SaaS Factory team and also part of the SaaS competency team. So, happy to have with us today our partner, our SaaS competency partner, Trek10.
Awesome. Cool. Uh, SaaS competency. I'm sure we'll be talking about that just a little bit. But without further ado, let's bring the stars of the show on. Nikody and Tony from Trek10. Hey
Hey,
guys, how you doing today? What are you doing here? What are you going to show us? What is Trek10? Nikody, how are you?
doing good, doing good. And so my name is Nikody Keating, and I am part of a company called Trek10. And my role and my title is Enterprise or Director of Enterprise Architecture, which really is a really long way of saying I come in and I'm connecting both business and technology together. I have to understand both sides in order to make sure that we're continually driving business outcomes for our customers.
Awesome.
And
And
hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here, James and Peter. Much appreciated. I'm honored to be joining Nikody Keating. I'm Tony Reyes, VP of Sales at Trek10. Trek10 is a premier AWS partner, and we have been focused only 100% on Amazon Web Services from the very beginning for 10 years now. We come at it from a very deep architectural and engineering expertise angle, and that provides, we believe, benefits to customers that actually do provide business outcomes, and we'll get into that. Sales, in my world, I believe sales is a noble, very noble profession because we want to solve customer problems, and that aligns very closely to your leadership principle, number one, customer obsession, and working backwards with them. So, honored to be here.
he's breaking out the LPs, right? He's
Uh,
not even from Amazon.
that's right.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, sales, I mean, there's always people who are like, "Oh, sales." But I mean, if without sales, we're trying to, as you just said, solve customer problems. We
Yes.
solve your problem and we sell it to you. And works out. Everyone wins. It's all good.
Right.
You
Uh,
know, I love the fact that Nikodi and Tony, you both talk about tech and business, right? As we talk with customers or partners who are looking for SaaS, some of them come from the perspective that it's a technology upgrade, and they kind of miss on the
Yeah.
business side. So Nikodi, I mean, you're talking about connecting the dots between business and tech. That's awesome to kind of hear in that SaaS space that
Well,
you're doing that.
and if you really think about it, like whenever you're looking at some type of transformation, it's never about going from where you're at to somewhere that's equivalent in your destination. You're not going for equivalency. You, you're aiming to open doors. You're aiming to open new sources of revenue, new ways of engaging customers, new ways of expanding your markets. And so, whenever you take a look at these transformations, there's business value to be gained. And the better that you understand that, how it ties to the AWS technologies, how it ties back to execution, the better off you are.
Yeah, definitely.
awesome. Cool. Uh, so the first thing I wanted to ask, well, I mean, did you want to, let's talk about Trek 10 for a second first before we get into my question. Uh, Trek 10, as a SaaS company, or as far maybe you want to tell us a bit about what you do. I mean, we have the high level of connecting the dots. What exactly do we do at Trek 10?
Yeah, I can start there, and
Yeah.
Nikodi can follow it and fill the gaps that I undoubtedly will miss. Great question, James. I think I'm going to start my answer with an unorthodox answer. AWS's logo uh, used to be building blocks with AWS tied to it, and then uncannily, and quite frankly, in my opinion, very wisely, the logo ended up switching to a very Amazon brandish Amazon smile, right? So exactly, there you go. And I loved when that happened, quite frankly, right? Because we have approached it from a perspective of at first, hey, look at all this great technology that is AWS is coming out here. True story. Our CTO and co-founder Andy Warzon began working with or the original three S3, SNS, SQS really in 2008, and he was partnered up with his previous company, really looking at, with Amazon, and started to understand what AWS was about, and that kind of opened the doors, right? And from a perspective of being able to tie that to his business at the time, he saw how wide open it could be. So what does Trek10 do? It mattered from a technical and expertise angle. We still have those chops today, but we've been able to apply ourselves into the program to work with customers from a migrations perspective, modernizations perspective, and that ties into SaaS, Internet of Things perspective, which has some SaaS stories, absolutely, as well. And being able to provide an outcome where, starting with the customer, what are you trying to solve, and providing a consulting experience that, yeah, doesn't need to get too techy, but if we need to validate and have the customer comfortable from an AWS perspective, they feel comfortable that we can take it all the way from a design engagement. That's where the modernization starts, that it will be optimized, and that they're going to monetize an experience for themselves as well. Nikody, anyone add?
I'd add to that. We're also that company that when we come in, we know you're on a journey with both your business and your employees. And so we'll oftentimes come in and help you level up your team while in our engagements. So by the time we leave, not only is your team up and running with a solution in place, but your team is to the point where they understand both how it's built, the philosophies behind it, and how to innovate on top of the platform.
Yeah, I have to add something on that. And I have to say, great call out, Nikody. Traveling with the customer in the journey, we find that we provide much more valuable to customers of all sizes when we work side by side and they learn from us at the end of the day, because AWS, you're never going to stop innovating. We will be around to work with customers and be able to provide a elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder mentality. And that addresses another problem, right? I think of 5-6 years ago, how will the level and the skilling up of enterprises and SMBs, how will it happen? I think the reality is the people already are there. They exist within your own organizations. There are many savvy people that want to learn AWS or take the next step with the next technology that's out there that you guys are innovating on. And we love to do that.
Great. So my next question was, we're going to be talking a lot about SaaS. Let's first start out. There's a million people have a million different definitions of SaaS, and they also have their own personal definition of SaaS. I always use the analogy of SaaS as Photoshop, SaaS as Gmail, those kind of things. You sign up for an account, you log in, that's it. Maybe there's a monthly fee. So with that said, Nikody or Tony or both, or even Peter, what is SaaS like in the context of what we're gonna? Yeah, I'm just sorry, Peter, off to the side. In the context of what we're gonna talk today, what is your Trek10's definition of SaaS?
Yeah, I can start on that too. Well, I think if we would approach it from a technical perspective, what comes to my mind is multi-tenancy and scalability, right? I mean, we think of a SaaS offering like all types of different emails that are out there, right? And getting a subscription tied to it, and having it scale and have it be multi-tenant. But I would add, to be very very direct in terms of it's about monetization. Are the companies able to build something that they're going to be able to build revenue because they're providing value to customers? I would add that, are they building it in such a way where the technical debt is limited over time? technical debt will grow regardless, right? It just does. But can you limit that sprawl? And therefore, you're starting to optimize from the very beginning. And I would add that, does it reduce risk, right? Does it come with all the bells and whistles from perspective of security and reducing your risk in such a way that you don't have to think about a lot of things because they're automated, right? So, Nikody, please, by all means.
Yeah. Now, the parts that I look at when I look at SaaS is you have those aspects that Tony was talking about, but like right after you get to that first point, the diversity is extreme in terms of what SaaS becomes. We work with companies all the way from companies who have IoT components to their SaaS products to companies who are strictly internet, enterprise-based, large scale, and global. And the challenges that you run into with SaaS is like when you're trying to define it is it's continual delivery, but not for all industries. So you have some industries that are really open to change, are ready to like take on the next big change as soon as it can possibly be done. Then you have some SaaS models where the companies are very concerned with every single change that goes out. And the various models to handle that from a technology, from an architectural perspective, et cetera, change based off the industry, based off of the desire, based off of the customer expectations. And so, this is one of those things where the definition of SaaS is really that mentality of I'm going to continually deliver a service that I will be responsible for as the provider, that you are going to pay me to be responsible for that. And, you also have platform as a service and, infrastructure as a service as well. But like SaaS really is where you're focused on that software aspect. So
Again, I love the fact that you guys are kind of touching on the business perspective, right? So like when I work with partners, we're looking to build a SaaS solution. First, define the business goal you're trying to achieve, and then make sure that whatever solution you're building supports that goal and help the organization meet those goals. So
yeah, well, 70% of startups fail because of lack of industry alignment, right? And so, designing your SaaS solution to match your industry and to match that expectation is one of those barriers that you have to get past as you build up a company.
it's a journey, like you said.
Yeah,
right? It's a transformation journey on both the tech side and the biz side.
Yep.
Awesome. And coming from AWS, Peter, you mentioned, we talked about the SaaS competency a little bit. Peter, what is this SaaS competency? I'm familiar a little bit with competencies and designations and all that differentiation. What exactly is the SaaS competency?
SaaS competency is just like any other AWS competency, is where we have the opportunity to work with our partners and validate their knowledge and their expertise and their experience in that space. So SaaS for us, with partners like Trek10, we really go through, we go pretty deep on some of the solution that they've built to help understand what their knowledge is, what their expertise is, and really kind of help them reach more of the customers that we have here that's looking for help in SaaS, to say, hey, we know Trek10, we validated when we have confidence in Trek10 that they can help you achieve those goals. So it's a program that is relatively small in terms of the partners, because we really want to make sure that we understand who's in the ecosystem, that we're very comfortable and very confident with the partners who have that reach that designation. And Trek10 here is one of the most active one in our program to this.
Great. Cool. So, sorry, Tony. I think I heard.
Yeah, I was going to chime in when Peter said pretty deep. I wanted to be like, it's not just pretty deep; it's very deep. I think when you go through the competency validations, right? Whether it's the migration competency, IoT, SaaS, right, which is what we're talking about, data, which Trek10 will be going at that next week, right? That process in going through that is a very deep process. I have to tip my hat to AWS in really doing their homework and digging deep on, does the partner have the technical expertise, but what are the customer stories of who you've worked with as well, and what has been the outcomes of the customer. And I think I would also add that the questions that get so deep is, would the customer validate what you said as well, right? I think that's a question that's popped up in those types of approaches. So, Peter, in terms of pretty deep, I'd say very, and good guys, right?
I was going to ask you, what do you think some of the benefits for customers to work with competency partners? You cover some of them already, but what are your thoughts there? Like, why should a customer go and find a competency partner to work with?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll start off with saying that I think that the word validation has been thrown out there a couple times by you and myself, right? It is deep validation, very, very deep validation. That is a bonus, right, for the customer and for everyone involved. Quite frankly, it's a win-win-win relationship. It's a win for AWS because they can confidently say, "Hey, this partner knows their stuff." It's a win for the partner because at the end of the day, that AWS has a lot to offer, right? And the architects and engineers that work for Trek10 love working on SaaS. Nikody loves working on SaaS and tying the business technology. So it's a win for us, and it helps us grow our business. And then the customers are looking for that that partner that is going to give them the best foot forward. Because at the end of the day, right, SaaS needs to work, has to work. There's real money on the line, right? And they need that comfort for sure, right? So I think that's what it works. And as Stephen Covey would say, right, wrote the highly effective people, 7 habits of highly effective people. When you get win, right? It's not just 2 partners, it's 3 partners, and it's very rare, but it does happen, right? So,
yeah.
So I follow up. I know that when Trek10 applied for the designation, you guys already had an established SaaS practice. But since achieving the designation, how have your experience been since achieving it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that just there's nothing like success to build on more success, right? And so it's just manifests itself. And then I mentioned the word. I am truly honored to be working alongside a Nikody Keating, alongside of Mike Hurlis, and alongside an Andy Warzon, right? Alongside these great architects and engineers that we just keep growing it, right? And the final thing I would say to answer your question, I mean, we're kind of living it, right? We're able to tell these stories on Twitch, to be able to share the fact that as a partner that's able to say howdy, right? It just grows upon itself based on the success that we're having.
And I would also share out, and if you could go ahead and share my screen quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I don't expect everybody to read through these, but when you take a look at the different models for supporting SaaS, the challenge that a lot of people run into is trying to identify the model that's going to best work for them. And so, you have the internet service where you kind of have just a single approach, a single way of delivering your data. Then you also have, a service where all of the data is being isolated. You have an approach where you have distributed systems, some of which could be deployed into your clients' accounts or into your clients' on-premises systems, or might be IoT. And then you have kind of a managed platform approach to SaaS as well. Having a partner who understands these various models, how to leverage them, how to collect data from them. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen so far from customers is not collecting CloudFront logs for what their customers are doing, and leveraging that to help drive business decisions and to turn it into analytics that can really change how they view their own business, how they view their customers, how they interact with their customers in order to drive better business outcomes. And so I just wanted to bring that to light, because that's one of those things where, like, as we dive in deeper and deeper, we take a look at, our customers. And I can talk quickly about a situation where we ran into this distributed system where we have a customer called Virility. And what's interesting about Virility is they're leveraging artificial intelligence to predict the ovulation cycle and to optimize the process of pig farming. Now, in order to do this, they have a SaaS aspect where it's an enterprise scale SaaS issue, where they have to be able to manage a workforce coming in, interacting with the data, contributing to the data, and leveraging the reports to drive outcomes. But they also have an IoT device that's being used in the actual facilities. This IoT device then needs to be able to communicate back, and there's an entire interaction there where it's also driven based off of a annual license model. And so as we came into this situation, we were able to leverage a lot of the AWS native capabilities to dramatically reduce the effort to go from them just starting off with a solution to them having a full-fledged solution, leveraging a lot of the AWS services as both the backbone as well as revenue generating value propositions to their customers. So just wanted to highlight that.
You know, you were talking about the observability, right? The CloudWatch, and a lot of time customers aren't collecting the data. Visibility in terms of what's going on in the system is a big topic when I talk to partners and customers. Yep. But I would assume that you're kind of sometimes you go into an engagement and you probably have to educate your customers in terms of, hey, you need to really be looking at these data in order to drive these KPIs. What are your experience with that?
Yeah, so when we oftentimes go into a conversation with a client, one of the first questions that we're looking for is, what is it that you see as the problem that you're trying to solve in terms of talking to us? Because we first want to understand like what it is that you're trying to achieve as a business outcome. Not necessarily, projects are great, but understanding why the project is taking place helps us be that much more effective at doing what we do. And then the second piece is we spend time understanding both the business model of our customers or of our clients. We understand their industries. So we spend time understanding how their industry works. We understand their customers. What are their customers' expectations on them? How do their customers perceive this particular SaaS company as part of their own ecosystem that they operate in? And from there, we can start identifying where there's gaps. For example, the concept of stickiness. So building a service that's delivering value, but the customer never realizes that they're receiving that value, even if it's like an email that they get, right? It's push information, but all they know is that they got that email. They don't really see that value. There's less of an interest in them associating your product with something that they're going to recommend. And so we can start looking at, okay, well, what is that value that you're delivering to your customer and how do they know it? How do you know that they see that value? And what are those key indicators that your customer is being successful? And then also, what are the indicators for a customer who's going to be successful when they start off on your platform versus one that's not? Can we map those out? And if we can't, why can't we? And then we go from that outcome approach back to how do we get there? And oftentimes it's like, hey, let's collect logs. If we can collect logs here, then we can start driving some of those key process indicators on the back end.
Yeah. I love that kind of working, the leadership principle. I love that working backwards. Here's a goal I'm trying to accomplish. How do I get there?
Yeah.
And I also like, for me, kind of one of the ongoing things in my history and with this show is you have, and you touched on this, was you have known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. So as you just said, this email I got, okay, cool. I got this email. What does it mean? Like, you don't even know that it could be super important. It's an unknown unknown. Like, what are these logs that I have, but I don't even know I have them? What do they mean? What do they do? What does it mean for me? Like, is that kind of thing.
It's like turning on CloudWatch logs and never going and looking at a single log.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that's happened. Oh, I'm supposed to do this? Okay.
Whoops.
I had a
Yeah.
question. So what approach would you recommend to SaaS companies which have been successful and want to grow even further? Do you have any what like I said, what are your approaches? What are your advice? What is your kind of core tenets, I guess you could call them?
So there's two different aspects that I look at when you have a SaaS company that's starting off and they want to go bigger. One is, are they leveraging their data effectively? Data is a revenue generating resource for your company. If you're not using it effectively, that's a really good area to explore. The second one, and the second one is one of my favorite topics. Do you want to share out my screen really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead and pop it back in.
Oh yeah, all right. Let's get
But
that
just
going.
real
All right.
quick, my coworker, data is the new oil. That's what she always says.
Yeah,
It's
it really is.
there we go. Here, I'll pop it
So
up there for you.
the other question that I tend to ask is, are you monetizing AWS services because you can? So just think about this. Like, your customers are using your platform. They're generating a lot of data. There are managers who want to make sure that your SaaS platform is being utilized. There are, executives who want to be able to pull up reports on how your systems are being used. Guess what? Giving them a QuickSites dashboard where you do multi-tenancy with QuickSites, giving them a QuickSites dashboard where they can not only just view the reports of your system, where you can sell reports and other reports and use those as monetizable resources, you could also sell the ability to access QuickSites directly and be able to create their own reports. So that's not actually too heavy of a lift. Second one, if you're operating a SaaS platform that has client interactions, is there a way where you can combine CDK and Lambda and create a framework where your customers can upload a little bit of code? It's locked down to just what they need to be able to do, but suddenly you're able to charge them for running their code on your SaaS platform. You've just extended yourself and your ability to provide even more value to your customers. Be able to sell Pilot Light data and DR capabilities to your customers. Listen, like the read replicas for RDS and DynamoDB global tables, if you're set up properly, you can just flip that on and you're charging your customers for the DR capabilities. Especially if you already have all of your systems written as infrastructure as code. And then finally, like, leverage their data warehouse as a driving source for revenue. They're generating information with your systems. You can turn around and leverage S3 and Lake Formation to sell their data right back to being ingested into their own data warehouse systems as a feature that you could charge money for. And so all of these pieces kind of fit together into that. AWS is coming out with new capabilities, including an AI, where you can start opening up AWS services as revenue generating resources for your SaaS business.
Nikody, you're touching on revenue generation. Tony, you said the same thing earlier as well. I know that we're kind of in a unpredictable or a shift, I guess, in the current economics, right? So, how has that SaaS business model changed for companies who are interested in creating a SaaS offering in their portfolio? What have you been hearing, or what are your conversations been like?
Yeah, Nico, do you want to start on this one as well? And I'll try to.
Good question. So as you know, Tony, why don't you start off on that?
I can do it. I can start off, and it is an interesting time. For sure. I'll start there, right? And I think that without knowing, we are all really 1 degree separated, 2 degrees separated from the CFO at organizations at this point in time. I touched upon it earlier, right? When we had we called it our sales kickoff this year, but quite frankly, it was a lot of people in our company to understand the direction. And I referenced it earlier again, is we have to help our customers understand that they're going to be in a market, and we're going to be in a market where we're talking to customers like, you should make this bet at this point in time. And it starts again with the goals. Peter, you said it earlier, right? Tying to the practice area of enterprise architecture, which, by the way, SMB, don't be scared, right? It is also for you to think like an enterprise and tie the same principles. It works, right? But let me wrap up the question by saying the following, right? Tied close to the CFO, every customer that we're speaking with, whether they're coming at it from a technical perspective or, as the case has been over the years, someone in e-commerce or someone in marketing, right? We really need to help them understand and paint the picture of how are they going to, again, generate revenue, and do we have the ability to share that story? How are they going to reduce that risk? And number three is this going to be built in such a way where they're buying what we're offering as a consulting firm, that it's also going to be easy to understand, easy to manage, easy to scale. And we hit on those things every single time that we can. And those questions of tell me about your business today, and based on your goals, where do you want to take it? Now let's show you a few things on what the possibilities are. What's the art of the possible? And I would say that we're having a lot of success talking with customers. There is a customer on my mind. I'm actually not going to name this one. It is an ISV software company where it is an application that they are tying into a monetization strategy for all of their support, everything they're supporting from a hardware perspective. The dollars that they're going to make on this is in the millions at this point in time, and will be growing. The cost of it is in the, at this point in time, thousands or tens of thousands a month. And the ability for them to lean in and say, hey, we built this on AWS, we're covered from compliance, from security perspective, is a story that has been told to the CIO, and they get it, right? By the way, I mentioned compliance, security. I would say in this economic market, I would say the other thing that really is offering value and customers are buying is security, quite frankly. That's the other thing. That's job zero, right? So it's an interesting economic climate, not insurmountable from a perspective of the reality of that the world hasn't stopped spinning, and I still need to go provide value to my customers. How do I do that? Right.
And just to add to that, what's fascinating to me is we see a lot of SaaS where they're really focused on that bottom line of how much are we spending? How do we cut back? At the same time, we're finding SaaS who are just going to the opposite extreme of, I want to use the latest technologies out there. I want to be innovating at a level because I know if I do this, I know if I can capture the imagination of people right now, there's a door open. And so I can go out there, I can provide a service that's going to reduce somebody else's cost. I'm going to provide a service that's going to open up somebody else's revenue capabilities. And suddenly you get this disparity between the ones who are like, we need to cut back on funding, and the ones who are saying, hey, we're going to fill that gap. Not only are we going to fill it, we're going to stay there.
That's Nikody. Gosh, Peter, what a great question. Right? Mind if I say one more thing here based on what Nikody just said? I mean, if you just Google the number of companies that have gone public, right, this year versus the number of companies that went public in 2021 and 2022, that paints the picture, right? If you also Google the rounds that are happening, large VC rounds, right? Common sense would tell you, oh my gosh, right? It's not as easy as it was before. Customers are going to take risks. That's all true, but there are absolutely gap fillers out there that are saying, you know what, I've used my resources wisely, or in the past I have more to work with, and I have this great idea, and the AWS keeps innovating, and I found a partner like Trek10 or another partner. It doesn't have to be us, right? There's a lot out there still, but I found a partner like Trek10. Let's talk, and let's start with the questions, starting with the customer first. Peter, as you said, where are you? Where do you want to be? How does Nikody and Aaron, Nikody and Eric, Nikody and Scott, Nikody and Tony, how do our team, how do our solution architects get in the room with you and be able to say, all right, let's do this. Let's make an investment, right? So, yeah.
A couple of things I caught my attention as you were answering that, right? SMB risk. And Nikody, earlier you said that you have Trek10, given the experience in the space, you guys see the indicator on what works and what doesn't work, right? And I think that's a great thing to keep in mind as customers are looking for a competency partner like Trek10, is that you guys have the experience and that know where to steer them. And I think that's something to kind of for customers to think about as well when they're looking for partners.
Yeah, well, and it's not just like where to steer them. It's also listening to them and understanding that, like, what's weighing on their minds. If what's weighing on their mind is that everything is risky and they really need to like button things down, now is the time to like focus on that automation that's going to shave costs and increase like the reliability of the system, because losing a customer is really expensive right now. We can help them go down that route in a responsible manner. At the same time, if they are, let's go gung ho, let's find ways to like maximize on this market, we're there to also help them go down that path in a responsible manner, because it's not always about diving in head first on either side. It's about understanding the gives and takes, the long-term benefits versus the short-term benefits, and then really how to use AWS to accomplish those outcomes.
My takeaway from a lot of this, I don't want to go too far back, but Nikody, in one of your slides, you were talking about making services pay for making money from the services you're paying for.
Right.
I mean, the idea is, yeah, we almost always want to save cost on these things, and they're going to cost money no matter what. Like any tool that you use or buy is going to cost money, whether it's cloud software or even a hammer. The whole point is you're paying for those services, like you said, make those services work to pay us, basically. Yeah. I love that. I thought that was my takeaway. Like whenever people talk about those costs, yes, they're going to cost money. It's just that's the way it works. Let's do our best to make the most out of it.
Well, and when you take a look at something like QuickSites, for example, where over the course of a month, if a customer were to use it every single day and open up a session every single day, and is one person opening that up, you will be paying AWS $5 for a month.
Yep.
That is extremely cheap if you're charging them, $100 for the analytics capability that they're paying $5 for. And if they don't use it, you're not paying. So there's real ways to balance it out so that you're really only paying when you're being paid. That's a great situation to be in.
Yeah. And as you're providing that value as that customer, again, it's customers are willing to buy because they see the value. It's just a value life cycle. That's all it is. Yeah.
And then my other thing that I thought was great, it's something I hadn't even thought of before myself. You mentioned some people, they want to try and be as efficient as possible, with their cost. But then you have the other side. Some people do want the latest and greatest. I'm one of the people, I like to have like the fanciest piece. I build a new PC like every 2 years. It's just a money sink for me. I got to have my 400 frames per second on my stuff. But I never even thought of it that way. Sometimes having those latest and greatest, even though they might cost more, it does open doors, as you said. Like it can bring people in that are interested, or open doors in the sense that I never thought of doing these things before, because I always use the cheaper stuff or the more proven stuff that's been around. And by using that latest and greatest, it kind of opens not just it opens those doors for possibilities, and also how do I say it? There's possibilities, but also like just the intrigue, I guess you could say. Like a big one. Sorry, just like a big one right now is generative AI. I mean, I'm not going to go too far off topic, but as soon as you hear that word, it's like everyone just their ears perk up. And so that was just a perfect example of what you were saying. Sorry, I'm done. Enough rambling.
Yeah. No, and I'd love to come back to the AI topic because it's a lot of fun. That's kind of the topic where you can dive into it for hours and like have very productive conversations that lead nowhere, but it's one of those thought-provoking exercises. But let me take you to an example. If you can go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah. Bring it up
So
there.
in the financial sector is really it's hard for them to have updates. And like, let's just take insurance as an example. So for an insurance, if you have a mission critical system for them and you want to update it, they have to make sure that it complies with all of their filings that they've done for all the states that they operate in. Now, that means that they're very reluctant for change. So let's just say that, and I'm giving a talk on managed platform approach for SaaS on August 2nd, but let's just say that we took our SaaS platform and we fired up a different instance of it in separate accounts for each of our customers. Well, okay, that's interesting. It's possibly going to drive up our costs. Okay, well, let's turn around and say, hey, customer, we have your SaaS platform. Why don't we displace all of the processing that you do around this particular system that used to be on-prem, now we're moving into SaaS. Let's displace that and put it into the cloud. You won't have to think about budgeting for replacing your on-prem systems, and you don't have to think about locking down an AWS account. You don't have to think about like all the security ramifications. We have a framework that will work to help you do that. Well, that just opened up the door for that company to take their software engineers and transition their software engineers over to using your platform. And if you do it right, you're having them write their code in the language that they're used to. So for example, if you had Java engineers, you can host Java in Lambda, and you could just have Lambda running. Your customers aren't going to interact with each other's systems, which means that a single customer can't negatively impact other systems. You can start selling access to analytics data coming out of your account. You can start selling access to CI/CD pipelines built up in code pipeline, where as they check in, it goes through, it deploys out. You can start leveraging more and more of the AWS ecosystem as monetizable, as more of an ecosystem for your customers than just your SaaS solution alone in some cases. So anyway, just wanted to share that out there and hit up a little bit of what you're talking about really capturing some of the pain points customers are dealing with, especially if they haven't migrated to cloud or if cloud is a challenge for them. SaaS can also help fill in that gap, and there's a lot of money to be made there.
Yeah, for sure. We have a question in the chat real quick from Emo Girl Lover. It's kind of going back just a little bit. Are there the things you would recommend prioritizing the latest and greatest tech usage for? Tony, maybe you have an idea?
I have an idea. It's probably totally off base, so therefore Nikody will come and rescue me.
Okay.
Okay. I'll start here. Trek10 has a set of values that that we go by, that we live and breathe, right? I mean, they're very closely tied to the Amazon leadership principles, right, as well. But I'll mention one, right, that doesn't answer the question yet, but friendly and laid back. Customers love working with us because we're friendly, we're laid back, but not too laid back, right? You have to be. We're in tech, we're in business, right? You have to have a deep killer instinct to help your customers succeed, right? I mean, another one is being practical and efficient, right? I mean, let's work with what we have and not be wasteful, right? But the one I want to tie on to answer this question is the one that really speaks to it is don't be satisfied with the state of the art, right? And what that means is, as Amazon Web Services, again, we're 100% AWS focused, and there's technologies like Datadog as a partner. We were one of the first, if not the first, MSP partner in Datadog. There's other technologies, but AWS is where we provide value by designing, again, building all that. We don't want to be satisfied with the state of the art, because IT and technology and the pieces move quickly. Generative AI, I mean, has taken the world by storm, right? I mean, when your great grandparents are talking about generative AI, you just know that the whole talking about it, right? But at the same time, not being satisfied with the state of the art, the value that we want to bring, and this is the technology aspect that I love about my colleagues, right? Is, does the technology work? Can it be validated? Can we add this type of database to solve the problem, like Nikody did for one of our ISV customers? Right. And I think maybe you're thinking Nikody TimeStream, like, hey, that could be, could we add that, right? And you only do that through having builders, a builder mentality, so that we can apply the right tool, like you said, right, James? Hey, I want to buy the drill hole, not the drill, right? I'm not selling you the tool, I'm selling you the outcome. But that does start, in my mind, with the design, the technical. But at the same time, there's a balance, right? We don't want to be on the bleeding edge for customers. We want to be on the cutting edge. We don't want to bleed them out. We don't want to say, hey, here's what we sold you. Nobody wants that. Nobody has time for that right now, right? So, Nikody, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there's, from my perspective, where I look at there's not a single set of tech that's going to be for everyone. Meaning, I could go and I could say, you know what, the best thing in the world is, this isn't latest and greatest unless you're working in an industry where you can't use it, but Lambda. Leveraging Lambda as your compute for a lot of companies who have spiky traffic or have systems that are sitting idle for long periods of time can save them dramatically. From a money perspective, from a monitoring perspective, from a how many different systems do I have out there and what do they do perspective. There's a lot of cool things there. Now, as we start taking a look at the newer things that Amazon releases, we always come back to, what is the outcome that we're trying to drive towards? And so going back to that example that Tony had, we had a customer where they were dealing with a lot of devices sending them data. And part of that data was a power reading on a battery. And they were storing that information so that their customers could go ahead and see that, how much battery life was left. But they were overriding that same value over and over again. And that was also a point of contention, because depending on how many messages were coming in, if you had multiple things trying to write to the same field, they would start choking on each other's rights. Well, that's a perfect example where you start taking a look at what's the latest out there. Let's take a look at TimeStream. So we're going to take every single measurement, and instead of trying to overwrite the latest value, we're going to write a new entry in TimeStream. Well, okay, TimeStream's interesting, but the minimum amount that you can query from TimeStream is 10 megs, which, I mean, that seems like it's going to get really expensive, except that this particular system, the customers going in and reading the data would happen once a week. And it would be the administrator, a single administrator, going in and looking at that data once a week. So suddenly, like, you're not looking at high read usage. You're looking at high write usage. And so TimeStream suddenly, like, we're capturing a lot of this battery information on And what that opened up was, hey, if we're capturing battery information, now we can tell system efficiency. We can start telling how batteries are doing in different environments that they're in. What is the degradation on battery life for this particular customer? And can we then leverage that information to generate revenue by selling it, let's say, back to the battery companies? It just opens up all those doors that you didn't have access to earlier. So whenever I take a look at the latest and greatest technologies that Amazon announces, first, I want to go in there and play. I want to understand like what this technology is, what type of tool is it, what shape is it in. But after that, like it's really comes down to what are the areas that you're running into that this set of technology solves for you, and if it makes sense, and if you can show the cost reduction versus what you're doing today, go for it.
Yeah. Very well said. I appreciate that. That's a good answer for that's probably a bigger answer than they were expecting, but it was good. Just real quick, if you're just tuning in, thank you for joining us here on Howdy Partner. My name is James Spencer. I'm a partner solutions architect here at AWS. Howdy Partner is our weekly show we do on the AWS Twitch channel where we bring our partners on from the AWS Partner Network. They come on, they show us what they've built, they talk about what they do, what they're good at, how they can solve your problems and save you money, get your stuff done, get you from point A to point B. Thank you for showing up. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Any comments, concerns, anything like that. I will keep dropping. We do have a survey link, not just for the show, but also for Trek10. Please fill out that survey. Honestly, it's really short, so please fill it out. I'm not going to suck up too more time. I just wanted to make sure that everyone who just joined knows what they're listening to. Sorry. Go ahead. That's a good spot for Peter. Do you have any questions at the moment?
Nikody, you were kind of talking about choosing the right technology to making sure that it's the right fit, right? And then if I kind of take a step back and say, not just technology, but for a company who are choosing a SaaS approach, like what are the likely drivers, or what are the some of the indicator that will help a customer determine whether the SaaS approach is the right approach for them?
Well, the earliest indicator for the SaaS approach is often your customers and their expectations. So when you're going up to and looking at your customers, if your customers are really shy about upgrades and they want things written in about how often you can upgrade, that's an indicator to you as to, okay, well, they really want a managed service SaaS approach. The second indicator is really just how sensitive and how diverse is their sensitivity to various criteria around security. And is it something where they view their data as needing to be isolated from everyone else's? Like, if their data was commingled, if you were to say leveraging tools for analytics and you went in, you scanned their data, it got commingled with somebody else's data, are you in trouble? Are you writing contracts that are defining that you can be a SaaS provider for this company, but you cannot use any of their data for system improvements? Which happens in various SaaS situations. We've even seen customers where, depending on what type of data, they have to go through special approval for certain types of data in their data set that they've collected as part of their SaaS solution. And so those are some of the early indicators. The next one is, what is your employees? Like what type of mentality do your employees have? Do your employees like to have systems where they can do A/B deployments? Do they like systems where it's, completely serverless, hands off, let's leverage tracing to handle the lift of, reducing support? Or, hey, we're going to hit scale at such a massive level that we have exceeded the serverless value proposition. Like there's a line that can be crossed in both directions. And misusing a tool can be extremely costly. Using the tool for the wrong purpose, like let's just say, for example, I was going to take Lambda and stream videos through it. Not the best use of Lambda, and probably not what it was ever intended for. Oftentimes, you want to hand that off to S3 as quickly as possible, so you're not in the middle of that. But that can also completely change the capabilities of your business. And so if you have a team that has a mentality that matches up with technology, leveraging the technology that aligns with your team is important. Having your team grow is also important. But if you ask a team that's never done serverless before to build a serverless SaaS solution, and to build a model that they've never been in before, the amount of struggle, the amount of churn that you're going to have, and the mistakes that happen through that process is going to be detrimental to yourself. And so, it's a matter of not only industry, but capability. And we can help get the capabilities built up. Oftentimes when we go in, we'll go into a project, we'll work side by side and like level up employees, get them to where they need to be. But if you're just starting off and you're making a SaaS company, going with what you know and doing it as quickly as possible, getting out to market and getting revenue generation going is probably your top priority.
Yeah, I think that growth is going to be a big one for a lot of companies, right? Especially the SMB space and even the larger enterprises as well.
Yeah.
James, you asking this what is SaaS question, Photoshop. I mean, that was a heck of a transformation, and it worked out very well for Adobe. And that was a large enterprise tackling a transformation.
Yeah.
I even mentioned that myself, but now that you just pointed out, I'm like, yeah, when did Photoshop become something that I bought at a store and downloaded? Like I just realized it happened and I didn't even really think about it, Like I back in the day I bought it at the store, I installed it, and that was it for 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden I went back to school, and one of my classes was like, you can use Photoshop. And so I was like, oh cool. I signed up for, I think it was like the student price was like $10. And I didn't even realize it literally till right now you just said that. I was like, oh yeah, I used to buy Photoshop like back in the 90s for $400 or whatever the heck it was.
Well, and to take that a little bit further, right? Like when you're going through a transformation step and you're looking at SaaS and you're trying to pick out like the technologies that both align to your SaaS model and where you'd like to be with your staff, it is possible to go from archaic skill sets to the latest and greatest skill sets in a fairly short period of time. I actually had an experience while part of an insurance company where we went from an AS400 mainframe on a custom version of COBOL, and we retrained them on TypeScript, AWS Lambda. And in that process, we rewrote the policy processing system for this company to be completely serverless. And the outcome of that was this company now has an entire system that is able to not only meet their demands, they can have multiple teams working separately on the same policy processing system at the same time on independent goals and business objectives. They have since released new states that they're serving with this system without making a single code change. Wow. And their capabilities just as a business are increasing. And so when you're taking a look at that transformation step of like, okay, well, we have a lot of programmers who are like C programmers or, Java programmers, and we know we don't want that, but the amount of effort to get over to the latest is high. It's still possible.
I'm a visual person. As you're describing that, I'm kind of thinking like AS400 COBOL to TypeScript and Lambda. That's like a leap, like at Grand Canyon scale, right? And then
Yeah.
Trek 10 is, and then like I visualize like Trek 10. You guys are saying that you level up the employees, you help the company go through that transformation journey. In my mind, that you guys are like the big ramp that Evil Knievel is jumping off, like from here to there.
I think we also have to give a lot of credit to Nikody here because in general, there was that internal tech business champion just being very open. And Nikody learned of Trek10. So back to the, he's not only he's also a client. He was also a client, right? And he understood that Trek10 could come in and say, all right, well, let's help you, right? And scale up and learn the skills and tie the technology to the culture elements to where you want to go, right? So want to be very open about that, right? And I look back on it, we're very proud of that. And we were able to work with this customer for a long time. So it's a great story and a great outcome.
I want to say before I transitioned into technology, I was in the casino. Well, they call it the gaming industry for 16, 17 years, and you'd be surprised at these billion-dollar MGM. I'm not going to name names, but all these huge. They still run on it looks like a terminal, like the majority of their stuff on AS400, and you're literally typing everything almost basically CLI style for everything. And it's just crazy that it's kind of crazy to me that a lot of that stuff still is around and like used so much, which kind of leads to my next question. What is you mentioned upskilling and transitioning? What if you how many of your projects are like transitioning from not like brand new necessarily, but like transitioning from an older or a different way to a new way? And what does that kind of look like? That you just really quickly, like that process, like do you worry about how big it is, how entrenched it is, those kind of things?
Yeah. Nikody, you want me to start? Or, yeah.
No, I'll go ahead. So when looking at one of these systems that we're going to be transitioning, the first question is, what is the size? And what is our objective in terms of timeline, budget, resources? Because Trek10 is about delivering value quickly. We don't want to be the guys who take a project, it's going to be a 1.5-year project, and you're not going to see anything until like the last 6 months, at which point you're testing and then it's going to go live. That's just not who we are. And so, early on in serverless, Trek10 was the first one that pioneered, to my knowledge, the Strangler method of let's take a component, pull it out, write it in serverless or write it in the new technology and have that connect up so that your monolith still is present, but you've taken out a single business capability from that. And then you take out another, and then you take out another. Every step along the way, not only you're transitioning technology, but you're also shifting business value to opening up new doors for new capabilities, training up your staff, doing it in a way where it's methodical. Your team is learning by doing. Your team is understanding some of the pain points, but also the benefits. The other approach that I've seen is when you transition a system, and depending on the size of the system, I've seen anywhere from a 10%, often when we're involved, because we scope it down, obviously, to a 70% failure rate. But it really comes down to, can you scope the problem to a point where you're still delivering business value? The timeline is short enough that the executive team or the directors see the value being delivered in a time frame where they're not having to justify the continued investment over and over again. Because, with all projects, you have a timeline, a horizon, at which point the company's just going to cut bait. Doesn't matter how close you are to the end. If you exceed a certain time period, the value to what's the perceived benefit and the cost just doesn't line up. They cut it. It's all a wash, or it's all waste to them, and they start on their next initiative. Oops, that was a mistake. If you scope it down to the right size, which is one of the areas we focus a lot on, you can be very successful at transitioning parts where you are demonstrating success over and over again. If the economic climate changes and they can invest, or they can only invest a fraction of it, you haven't lost anything. It's not all or nothing. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Mind if I add something? I think you asked for specific number 2, James, right? And I think that, with Trek10, early on, we really cut our teeth with startups, and we still work with startups as well. In fact, might even have a case study about that with regards to when we can discuss here very shortly, because it can apply to a lot of startups, right? And by their very nature, startups are, especially ones that want to get on SaaS, right? But we go all the way up through enterprise as well. And the reason I want to chime in on this is we've been very successful with extremely large customers, enterprises or ISVs or digital native business, working with an offering that we call developer acceleration, where we have modules with regards to how do you build on cloud native, learning and teaching and dialogue. And the next step after that is let's go build something together into proof of concept or into production. The next step after that is, hey, we actually want to bring more people into the room for more developer acceleration. That's been a pattern that's to the point where now, like, hey, look, we actually have a kind of a big initiative, bet the company, and you're going to be the partner that actually we kind of know what's going on. We're going to be here, and you're going to be here with us, and let's go build. And we need to do it in 9 months. To Nikody's point, right? At a certain point in time, customers will cut bait, so they say, all right, we trust Trek10. Startups are a little bit different, right? Developer acceleration is they want to move quickly, right? And then that offering really becomes in terms of a design engagement of how do we work with a startup or even SMB where, hey, I understand AWS to a certain degree. I don't know how all the components fit. Can you show me a roadmap and then proceed and then build a trust there? So I hate to sound like it depends, but it does, because again, starting with the customer, where they are, what the resources are, what's the timeline, do they have appetite to learn, or do they really need to get going quickly? We'll adapt. We'll adapt, right?
Yeah. I mean, saying it depends that's as long as, if you give us some but something behind it, that totally makes sense. Obviously, you're going to have different situations, like you said, people that need something right away, people that are enterprise, and it's going to be a huge lift, or just startups that just they want to start doing things the right way and the most efficient way, in the way that they see it. Or even, like you said, fill in those gaps and build that trust. They know a little bit, and then you come in and help fill that gap, and then the relationship just continues from there.
I got a question. So, being part of the competency program, I get to see some of the launches or the project that our partners are working on. And I have to say that when I was going through Trek10, you guys had some of the most unique and interesting case studies, or like launches. I'm sorry. Care to share anything that's gonna stand out? That's like that was a good one. Nikody, Tony.
Nikody.
I'm gonna go with Oster from just a pure customer, what they're doing for their people perspective. And if you're not familiar with Oster, they do prosthetic limbs. So they're the ones who make the prosthetic limbs, and the most custom piece of that entire prosthetic is the piece that joins up with the actual limb itself. And so we had a chance to work with them and to help take a platform that was originally pre-built and move it into AWS, get it to scale using a lot of AWS services like SQS, like S3, like Lambda, in order to make it so that for all of the different locations, people could go in, they could get a scan done of the point that's going to connect to the prosthetic and have something custom made extremely quickly versus going through an entire process. And just the benefits that we have in terms of, if you think about the benefits we have from a standpoint of somebody loses a limb that's extremely difficult, or one of the prosthetics breaks, like that is life-changing, and being able to improve people's lives by helping Osser was incredible. And the system is able to scale at a rate mainly because you don't have a lot of compute sitting in between what the customer is doing that would demand a high tolerance for scale from a compute perspective. We're able to offload that off to S3 and leverage native services to really make a cost-efficient and effective solution when it comes down to all the feature sets that we could leverage.
Yeah.
Tony?
Yeah, I can't speak publicly about revenue. I can't speak publicly about where do they go next, right? But obviously being sold in their distribution system in the U.S. is a big, big deal. And, you know, I have to, what I'm about to say comes from our main stakeholder on his exact words that really tugs at my heartstrings. I have to say that I go on LinkedIn often and I see what Osser will put, and they will in video, and I just reshare it immediately. What many of us, right, that have our limbs intact, we take it for granted every single day. I know I do, right? I know I do. And what we were being told is what Design Studio will do is let's get away from the molding, right, of fitting the prosthetic limb, and use technology, right, on the front end, but also the back end, right, on the revenue side of all that, right, to make that prosthetic fit the best possible way for that individual. Because the higher degree of accuracy that you have, the better that individual will be able to use their limb. And so, you know, these aren't my words, right? But the life-changing element of just being able to get into a tub or a shower that 2 inches, 3 inches, I don't think about that.
Yeah.
James, you're like, yeah, you don't think
Yep.
but the better it fits, right, the better someone can just walk in, go in and say, hey, I'm clean, feel great. You know, now I'm going to brush my teeth and feel even better, right, and go about my day. And I think that that's an amazing story, and I am just it's just amazing to be tied to that organization, right, for sure. Again, I can't speak about, hey, what happens next, whatnot, but what I can say, right, is that again, that win-win-win technology, AWS, what you folks build every single day and innovate, right? A customer is saying, hey, these are the possibilities. Let's take this asset, and then how do we scale it? Okay, who do we work with? Trek10. That's a win-win-win that I hope that we're tied to Osser for forever, quite frankly, perpetuity.
Yeah.
It's such a privilege and a unique opportunity to use technology to change someone's life,
yeah,
in a good way, right? So
that's right. And we're you know, we continue to barely scratch the surface on you know what's going to happen, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we can sit back and say, oh, AWS has been around since 2006. That's not the way that it should be seen. It should be seen of like, all right, we're barely scratching the surface with the different business models that SaaS can deliver. But obviously, we're talking about Gen AI a little bit. It's going to be a fun ride. Continue to be a fun ride. So
and pretty much every other feature that Amazon releases on either a monthly basis or in a whole slew at reInvent, like everything that comes out from you guys is a lot of fun just to play with, to like try to figure out, like, is this changing Like, is this something where it's going to be life changing? And like every single tool that I've seen out there, it's just like, I could use this in these various scenarios. And then I always ask a ton of questions and find out, oh, no, can't use it in these scenarios because, like, for example, Ledger, we can't like make thousands upon thousands of queries a second to it. Well, shoot. But it's still really awesome. It's definitely like changing the game where you start taking a look at like compliance, for example. We do a lot of compliance, and from compliance, I mean like global compliance, where we're dealing with GDPR, we're dealing with the EU Data Act, and like making sure that we can be in, like we write systems that are in compliant with all of these different regulations globally, leveraging AWS, leveraging some of the config rules, for example, leveraging native capabilities to help make that possible from a checks and balances perspective. Make it possible for us to be able to go in for auditors and say, hey, here's all of our reports. Here's all of our proof. Here's the one place the operations manager can go in and see the list of all the risks. And to be honest with you, I think the biggest change that AWS has created in the marketplace, especially when it comes to SaaS, is around security. It's like security was always something. I mean, I worked at Microsoft in the early days, and we had, the security books that they'd hand out on a regular basis. And all of us were supposed to read them. We all did read them. They were long. It wasn't fun. But recently, I've had the experience of working with a company where we were trying to get to HIPAA compliance. And the auditors came in, and we had the list of capabilities in terms of which features inside of AWS that we're using. We had the list of config rules. They're able to check the box. Not only that, but we then turned around and were able to show all of the patching we did to the software. And software dependency patching wasn't really a thing 15 years ago, like even 10 years ago. Like I was doing an audit with a company on a software product they purchased. It was written in Java. We shoved it through one of the security tools that like do dependency mapping, and there were a massive amount of like critical issues that needed to be patched. The software wasn't supported anymore, but it's just one of those things where like that's one of the values of SaaS, but it's also one of the values of freeing up people's time from managing hardware and the infrastructure systems on a day-to-day basis to really focusing on how do we improve software, how do we improve our security, how do we make this easy. So I just want to thank AWS for helping free up some of that brain capacity.
I think it's great that you kind of touched on some of the points that people, enterprises, companies, when they evaluate whether SaaS is the right approach or not, they may not be thinking about. So I think you kind of provided some additional pieces there, food for thought.
Yeah.
I will take full credit for all of that praise. Thank you very much. I'm wearing the shirt. No, but you mentioned a lot of those features, like you said, they fill a gap that you might have had, or if they don't, maybe they're exciting to just play with and see what they're capable of. A little bit, pull behind the curtain a little bit, and I'm sure it's not that unknown, but the majority of the stuff that we do build or features we do build are from customer requests. Like it's not a joke, it's not lip service. Like we legitimately have, hey, customers, we need this, and then we go build it. And then if that's like 90% of it, I'm don't quote me if I'm wrong, then it's like 8% of it, I want to say, is just stuff that we run a lot like our own small startups. So like if I have an idea of a product, a feature, this show is an example. I mean, this wasn't totally my idea for the show, but they give us the leverage to just act like a startup and say, you think that's interesting, you want to build that, you see a need for it, or you just think it's cool, go build it. And if it works, cool, it's a thing. If it doesn't, whatever. And that's just how we that's how we do things with all that around here. So
Yeah.
that's perfect analogy.
And you mentioned startups as well. On the enterprise side, there are some amazing integrations that are happening with a lot of our different customers and retail and quick start, right? Restaurants and whatnot. But let me go back to startups, son. I think that's important. To other customers, right? BrewLogix started with IoT, a connected keg, right? But really, what their goal is, though, is they want to bring the power of what you just talked about to Main Street and to craft brewers and to bars, right? And just an enterprising team. And what they're doing, what's the business value is it's not just connecting that data to, hey, I need to change my keg. They're also tracking data and tracking it to how can I build a partnership with what was burgeoning, right? In the time of COVID, remember those days that there was a huge RV spike, right? And still people are still using their RVs. Well, how should I build an app that connects local breweries that would gate those business and have the ratings, but also be tied to that data in those kegs? And they did. They created, and we helped build, right, My Brewery DB, right? So connecting that, and that's a business outcome. Another customer is Chuck Lab, and Chuck Lab is trying to help us all be safe. And what they're doing is through legal means recording conversations in prisons and jails so that they can help law enforcement sift those conversations to keep others safe. They have lots of examples where they've been able to help children, right, not be abducted, as an example. What was the simple methodology in terms of their offering? Simple, a landing zone. They really need to understand how do we build this thing so that it's top notch from the ground, from ground zero. It's a landing zone, right? And so those are the types of things that I think James, right? That idea started somewhere with the customer. Hey, what if this is packaged as a solution, which obviously Trek10 has been leaning into in terms of solutions and repackaging. We've got some for IoT as an example that really helps provide. Again, we talked a lot about revenue generation. That is important, no doubt about it. We're all grown-ups here, but also what if we do that and also help the world be a little bit better? And we've got some customers that are doing that for sure.
Yeah, I like both those case studies. That sounds keeping kids safe and then going ahead and having a beer afterwards. Those sound like
yeah, that's right. That
sounds like a good day to me.
Great day.
I heard you say IoT. Specifically, we did have a IoT conference, and Trek10 was there. Do you want to share any of your experiences from the conference, or any of the outcomes that came from that event you went to?
Nikody, you want to take this one, or
Go for it.
Yeah, I can lean in. Yeah.
Was that the wrong question? Sorry.
No. That's the right question, right? I think IoT has been an interesting spot due to the chip shortage, right after with supply chain after COVID. It is really picking up though now, and I think that the question earlier, right, about how does Trek10, or when do you position advanced technology, right? And I mentioned with our principles and value statements, and let's be on the cutting edge and it'll work for you, but not on the bleeding edge. Kind of applies here. That analogy really applies here, where what we're seeing now are customers 5 years ago, like, I want to connect a hairbrush. Okay, what's the business value, right? And then the chip shortage happened. Right now, what we're dealing with is a lot of cool customers that are not just cool, but they're saying, hey, I have a digital transformation strategy. There's a global company right now where we're going to be working with them, hopefully, on additive manufacturing. and being able to connect things in that type of environment. And then it ties completely to their digital transformation. It's a term I have to use, right? It's valid story. And that is an example of where what I'm indicating, it's picking up yet again. The chips are there, the bets are being made, the strategy fits back to the monetization strategy, and am I providing value? And it's not, I don't want to use the word foolish, right? But it's not just, hey, I'm going to connect this hairbrush as an example, right? So I think that's the key learning that I'm learning in this environment at this point in time. And by the way, I mean, one of those companies is Circle Gas. Again, really neat company, actually based out of Europe, but most of their operations are in Africa. And what we did from first iteration was being able to, what they do is they want to tie in easily gas, propane tanks to the most remote villages in the African continent. So that, again, things that we take for granted, just cooking something, right? We push a button and voila, microwave or light up the stove, whatever, that they can have, that families can have access to it in the most rural parts or large cities like Nairobi, Kenya, and just be able to have access to that. What did they want to do? They wanted to connect that, not just the hardware components, but connect that. And again, I find Africa, have not been there. I will be there. So interesting because they don't have telephone wires, right? They didn't build that infrastructure, but everyone has a cell phone, right? Cell phone, SaaS, gas, boom, connect it. It's genius. And that's another example, right? That we're able to tie in the benevolence of all this, but also the fact is that value statement is for everybody, the customers, AWS, certainly Trek10 with the fun work that we do, and the customers, right? So,
and the other aspect to that is we're not only seeing IoT devices being created, we're seeing them really like their usage expand. And what I mean by that is, like, oftentimes you'll end up with somebody creating an IoT device and they'll go build the device, and then they'll start building on AWS, and they'll start building a solution leveraging the methodologies that they're used to, which often aren't AWS methodologies. And so we'll get called into some of these projects where it's like, yeah, this is costing a lot more than we expected it to. Can you guys come in and like help us? And we'll come in, we'll take a look at what's being accomplished and how it's being accomplished. And oftentimes our recommendations both cut the time to delivery of the entire solution, but also dramatically cut costs. And that's mainly because we figured out how to leverage the AWS ecosystem to cut down the amount of effort, the amount of code that we write to replace components. And by the way, one of the fascinating parts about that is I am seeing more and more your cell phone being used as an IoT collection device. The amount of sensors in this thing, the amount of capabilities that a cell phone has, we will see apps being created that leverage AWS IoT and are capturing some of that information, sending it up to IoT collection SaaS solutions. And like suddenly, like, it's not just an ecosystem of I'm going to make a device. It's I'm going to write an app for your watch. I'm going to write an app for your phone that leverages AWS IoT as part of its core capabilities.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, oh no, go ahead, Peter.
I said it's cool to see how far the technology has come, right? I remember like 15 years ago, I had a flip phone. My dad's like, "You gotta upgrade your phone." Like, no, this is all I need for a phone. And nowadays, like, there's crazy amount of stuff you can do with your phone. It's such a powerful computer sitting in your pocket. How do you leverage that? And IoT starting to kind of tap into that. So yeah.
There's organizations talking about. You mentioned the watch, Nikody, but you know, that we're talking to in terms of how do I make my fabric smart on my clothing, right? And that we were having those discussions 5 years ago, but now it's actually a lot more real. It's possible, right? With the hardware components. And then not only that, back to this monetization strategy, but it goes even deeper than that. Not just making it smart for me and the customer is, what are the materials that are being bought, right? And should I have that type of color? I mean, I'm wearing purple. That's because I look good in purple, right? But it's not a color that many people would buy, right? But the point is that goes back to supply chain management. That goes back to how can I be competitive? Back to those business discussions. Could I procure different material that feels the same but costs 30% less, right? It's a lot of business discussions that are being had, not just at the IT level. And look, we're all, I'm not a technologist. You three are, right? I can just play on TV, right? But the business folks are taking notice and saying, I didn't know that was possible, and now I believe it is. And how do we get in the room and make this a reality? And that's where the magic happens. So anyways, just a few more other, right? A few more other examples that could be eventual case studies and could be coming to a Howdy partner near you eventually.
That'd be great. Yeah, Tony, I typed the comment in the chat, but you mentioned Africa. They don't. You said they don't have telephone lines.
And very rare. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I had never even. I've literally never thought of that. Like I mentioned in the comment, I said, generally speaking, I always think of technology as being iterative. We developed Morse code to talk to people far away. Then we developed actual, analog telephone lines, and then we developed this, and then, and now we're here. I had never even in my life considered a place where they might have just like, I don't know what you want to call them, generations, steps, stages, places where it's like they went from nothing to boom, cell phones.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that same thing could be said about how we now are able to pay with our phones.
Yeah.
The payment technology has actually been around for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, and it was used in countries where people would get mugged a lot. And so you'd carry around your phone and you would actually pay your bank, or not your bank, your cell phone provider, to have money available on your phone to pay with it.
Interesting.
And so that's where that technology kind of originated from, was kind of those more risky countries where carrying cash around that just you'd get it stolen.
This isn't like a risky country scenario or anything like that.
No.
My 8th grade kid went to a field trip and they went to a amusement park, and the amusement park doesn't accept cash anymore. Yeah. So she's like, can I have your watch for the day? So she took my watch, and I get text messages saying your credit card was used, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Same thing. I actually was lucky enough to go to the All-Star game yesterday, and T-Mobile Park is one of those places that it's completely cashless, and they have a handful of machines where you can get I don't even know what it is. It's a card, whether it's MasterCard, Visa, I don't know, but to convert it so you can actually buy your peanuts and Cracker Jacks and such. But also, just one last comment about that was, you mentioned all the different sensors and all the different things that are capable on your phone. I think about this. This is something I do think about frequently. If I always walk out of the house and it's 3 things. It's phone, wallet, keys. I always count to 3. Do I have 3 things? If I was going to lose 2 of those things, it'd be the wallet and the keys. I would freak out more about losing my phone than I would my wallet. Wallet, I can cancel the cards. I can get a new, ID printed, blah, blah, blah. Phone, like, if they're managed, I lock it and everything, but if they manage to get in there, like, I don't even know what they could do.
You could be impersonated. Like, you could be completely impersonated. That's exactly right.
Well, I don't know about me, but.
The other funny thing is, like, if you lose your phone, there's no more payphones out there. Like, that is your lifeline to everything. Like, general communication.
Yeah.
Back to the analogy of thinking technology being iterative. It's very true to think that way. And I'm not picking on enterprises. I mean, when we work with them, right? But the natural step is, Right. I mean, look, when virtualization came out, that was a big deal. Not just $1. It's all, it's a huge deal. I remember that being, speaking of SaaS, I mean, the question that was asked when I was selling software back in the day, can this run on virtual server? I mean, that was like the cutting edge question. Can this be a virtualized, or does it have to be the old, just one box? Anyways, back to the country, right? I think at the end of the day, and I tip my head to Nikody as well, within enterprises, we are taking those iterative steps, and it's starting to gain a lot of steam where it's like, okay, I can graduate. I get it. I understand it. Let's graduate and let's get the right people in the room, right? I think we're seeing that, but I'm glad you caught on to that, James, because I just have to say, at the reInvent last year, I just made a point to go and talk to people that were not, that were not U.S. based, and just tell me your story. Why are you here? How did you get here? Oh, I had no idea that that fintech is huge in Zambia, right? I mean, it was just eye opening and amazing, right? And just asking questions, and that's where I learned that. I learned that from a gentleman. He's like, yeah, man, we don't have telephone lines. I mean, everybody has a cell phone. We all have cell phones. A telephone line, that is a foreign concept. For us, it's all cell phones and all, Starlink, if you will, right? Satellites and connectivity antennas. So, yeah.
Anyway. Tony, this is a great engaging conversation. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. And you were talking about reInvent last year. What's Trek10 doing this year? Any plan to go to reInvent where people can come up to you and start chatting or storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. We will absolutely be at reInvent this next year. It's already in the works. I don't have final say on all that. I'd have to lead on Scott Sawaya, our marketing brand ambassador, right? But we really love connecting at reInvent. And shout out to the New York AWS Summit, right? We will be there in a couple of weeks in force and in mass, and connecting with our customers, our AWS brethren. There for sure as well. So absolutely, stories, and then listening too, just listening a lot for sure.
Yeah. Well, and brainstorming too. Like, if you're running into a situation where, we can just give you a little bit of advice and you're on your way, great. But we'd love to have those conversations, because we could also find areas where, it would make sense to work together, and the value that we'd create would totally justify any expense.
You said advice, me kind of from a partner solution architect from SaaS Factory. Can you give me a preview? What kind of advice would you give to a customer or a company who was looking to transition to SaaS?
Yeah, well, so when you're first jumping into SaaS, the first advice I give, and this is general, no matter who you are, whether you're SaaS or not. Do you know when your systems are failing? If you don't, that's the first piece that I would figure out how to get in place. And there's companies like Datadog, there's companies like Lumigo that do tracing, and where you can plug in a small component into your code, and they'll figure out what your code is talking to. And when failures occur, they stitch together the logs, the various calls you're making out to various services, and they pull that together so your engineers, A, don't have to access your production systems. So suddenly your production system's a lot more secure because you don't have engineers in there. But B, make your engineers' job and make their time more efficient, more effective than getting your system back up.
Making engineer job more fun, checking off the compliance checkbox at the same time.
Yeah.
Win, like Tony says, right?
Exactly.
How about any other events? Is Trek10 participating in? Are you guys hosting any more SaaS events? Any more AWS events? I saw earlier that there's a Twitch show coming up.
Yeah, Nikody, what that?
Yeah, so we're going to be hosting, or we're going to be on an AWS Twitch show, and on that Twitch show, we're going to actually walk through in a little bit more detail the various SaaS tenancy models, and focus on that kind of managed service SaaS approach, along with some code which fires up new accounts, deploys code out to those accounts as a product, and then you're able to see how many different accounts you have, which versions of the products they're on, when they're deployed, etc., and basically provide in a single dashboard that information. And it's going to be shared out also as a GitHub repository. So we're going to walk you through what that looks like. If you think about SaaS, and this particular type of approach, you would think about we'd want to connect this up to Salesforce. We'd want to connect this up to Service Desk or what have you in order to fire up these accounts. It'll be a good talk. We're going to dive into the code a little bit. We're going to have a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Awesome. Tony.
Yeah.
A little birdie told me you had some advice that just popped into your mind.
Yeah. I'm gonna answer it from a business perspective. I think the question you'd asked was advice for customers starting out on SaaS. Was that right? I mean, would that be?
Yeah.
Right? The advice you would give to customers who are thinking about transitioning to SaaS or starting up on SaaS.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this. Allow me to put my sales hat on for this one. I have to. Please put me. AWS Marketplace is a powerful force multiplier for your customers to purchase all types of technology. It's fantastic. Trek10 was one of the first partners to transact through private offer years ago, if not the first, right? So we understand it, and we have an offering out there that is on the AWS Marketplace that's called Trek10 SaaS Accelerator. That's taken really the kind of the teachings that Nikody and our architects and engineers have applied. How do we get started? How do we get the conversation started? And so, I again, having the sales hat on, that is also something to look into, right? And saying, all right, is this a way that I could start that's packaged, that answers the questions for, again, the right people in the room, and then being able to answer the question, how do I get started? Is there something that I can look at and say, all right, is this the right thing for us? And then not only purchase it, but even have a discussion if I need to understand it. So I definitely want to plug that in while we have the chance.
Cool.
Yeah. I put the links in the for the AWS Marketplace and Trek10. We love the marketplace. It makes things so much easier, so direct. So go ahead and check them out there. Check them out on their Trek10 at their homepage. I dropped a million links in here. Connect with link Trek10 on LinkedIn. Here, let me go ahead and pop some more up in here. Is there anything that you guys would like to plug without me having to shout it out? Or it doesn't have to be. It could be fun. If anything you want. If not, that's cool. I have a lot. I could say a couple more things.
I have a fun thing to share. I mean, if you guys are okay with that. I know we've talked a lot about SaaS, but we can.
Sure, we got a minute.
We got a minute. Again, I can't truly state. The fact is, it did start with technology with AWS, right? And it has transpired over to business outcomes. The neatest, Werner Vogel's right. That all things distributed that you shared with regards, that's great. I love. He's a genius, right? Tying all that, it's a highlight. But James Hamilton's speech years ago to reInvent, talking about engineering, talking about the cables, right? Just the hardcore engineering aspect and the design aspect was a highlight, even for me. I'm not the deepest technologist, but I understood the aha moment was already there. Just want to say that I did see him in Seattle at a restaurant. Not only that, locked eyes with him and said, Dr. Hamilton, right? And he said, hello. That was it. That's the story. I think that the architect and engineering and business side, all three, again, back to that win-win-win, is very, very important, tying the technology to business outcomes. And that's why Nikody exists with an organization, and we love what we do, and we appreciate this opportunity to talk about it. So.
Awesome. Great. So last thing from me, please fill out our survey. Once again, it goes to those unknown unknowns. we can't make the show better if we don't know what you don't like, and we can't capitalize on the things that you did love. So please fill that out. It's really fast. It's a couple clicks. And also, if you'd like to connect with Trek10 beyond those ways that I mentioned in all those links, in the survey, you can submit your email as well, and then I will pass that along to them, and they will hook you up with anything you need. Well, looks like we're coming up on time. Let me drop the survey link just once more for everyone. Please check it out. And last call for any last things before we sign off. 1, 2, 3. All right. Well, thank you once again. That was a great Howdy Party episode. Thank you to our partners at Trek10. And we will catch you next week with our continue our SaaS series. We're going to have Slalom joining us next week. Please tune in for that, and we will catch you later. See you, everybody.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Peter. Yeah.